Hello and welcome to GameSack. The standard sound format for the Master System is PSG, or Programmable Sound Generator. There's also another type of sound available called FM for frequency modulation, which is kind of more akin to how the Genesis sounds. Now, in Japan, there was an FM sound unit released for the thing, and of course it never made its way outside of the country, but games that were released worldwide still contain the code for the FM sound, and it'll play if it detects the hardware. The Sega Mark III is the Japanese version of the Master System. In 1987, the FM sound unit was released, which attaches to the console to play FM sound for compatible games. Games could only play in PSG or FM, but not both simultaneously because mixing does not occur in the Mark III FM sound unit. Inside is a Yamaha 2413 sound chip with 9 mono channels. Later on, Sega released an updated Master System in Japan and it had the FM unit built in. This one can play PSG and FM sound simultaneously. These days you can mod your non-Japanese console with a Yamaha 2413 chip and get Master System to Genesis adapters with a 2413 installed. These more modern chips are very temperamental though. Most of the time they work fine, but sometimes they can sound wrong or they won't work at all for months at a time for no reason whatsoever, only to work perfectly fine again later. Modern Genesis flash cartridges usually have this functionality built in, which makes things a lot easier. And of course, you can obviously use emulation. Quite a few games that have FM sound weren't released in Japan, so those games were never heard in FM for like close to a decade after they were originally released. Kinda interesting when you think about why they might have done that. Anyway, I'm gonna first play the PSG examples of each game, followed by the FM example so that you can judge for yourself. Let's get started. We begin with Afterburner. This port of the revolutionary arcade sacrifices a lot in this home port. The FM music here sounds a bit more quiet and subdued, but more pleasant overall. The sound effects, though, sound more like farts in FM, which is something you'll probably hear a lot of in this episode. Alex Kidd BMX Trial. This infuriating game was only released in Japan, and it requires the Sega paddle controller that will likely get tossed into your TV out of frustration. The FM music here is much more pleasant than the PSG stuff, and it does make the game a little bit more bearable. Alex Kidd The Lost Stars. This is a port of the arcade follow-up to the original Alex Kidd and Miracle World game. The music is done by Hiroshi Kawaguchi of Afterburner, Outrun, and Space Harrier fame. The music sounds much better in FM with an actual bass line that sounds nice. However, some of the sound effects are better in PSG, like the noises that these girders make. Overall, I think I'd still choose the FM version for this one. Alien Syndrome. The music and the sound effects are both very minimalistic no matter how you play it. Overall, I'd say the FM gives it the slight edge, especially for that boss tune. Next up is Altered Beast. This one wasn't released in Japan, so the FM sounds in this one didn't get heard by anyone for quite a while. The FM music here is quite subdued and not very impressive, but at least it has something resembling bass. The sound effects in the PSG mode are ridiculous when the enemies shatter, but I kinda like them compared to the basic FM sound effects. Aztec Adventure. I haven't played this overhead action game very much in my life, but it's interesting. I feel that the FM music in this one is better. The snare drums are a bit much in both versions, but they're less annoying in the FM mode. Battle Outrun. This is basically Outrun meets Chase HQ. It wasn't released in Japan. They were working on the FM sound for this one, but turned it off. It can be unlocked with a simple patch. And it's not very good at all. It's no wonder that they locked this away. Blade Eagle 3D. This mediocre shooter lets you adjust between upper and lower planes, which is tough to judge in 2D. The FM music here isn't bad at all, but I honestly feel that the PSG has a bit more punch and polish. I don't know, what do you think? Here's Bomber Raid from Activision. This chaotic little shooter was the final game released for the console in Japan. It has some music that sounds jovial and a bit old-timey militaristic. Playing an FM helps to make it sound a bit less silly. The boss theme is good though and sounds good either way, but I think FM is a touch better overall. Well, now you see what I'm doing with this episode, and I hope it's not too off-putting for many of you. I know a lot of people don't really care about video game sound. Oh well, I care, and I'm loving every second of it. So let's continue. California Games. This one lets you compete in a few different events, and it wasn't released in Japan. The FM music isn't bad, but it is kind of average. I'm definitely more impressed with the graphics in this one than I am the audio. Captain Silver. This is a hack and slash where you love nothing more than to collect letters to spell out Captain Silver. It's truly revolutionary. Both the PSG and FM here are pretty basic, but the FM is a little easier on the ears, I think. Casino games. This one lets you play 3 different games that only exist in casinos, like pinball. It wasn't released in Japan. The FM mode here is much better than the PSG sound in my opinion. Cloud Master. This horizontal shooter was surprisingly not released in Japan. The music sounds bad no matter which way you choose to listen to it, but the sound effects themselves are better in the FM mode. Cyborg Hunter from Activision. This is a cool exploratory action game. The music is fantastic in both PSG and the FM mode. You really can't go wrong here either way in my opinion. Double Dragon. This beat 'em up actually puts the FM to pretty good use. The music is much better in FM, but sadly the sound effects lack the impact of the PSG mode. Here's a couple of examples. Double Hawk. This is another game where the FM sound is locked away behind a code or a patch. This shooter wasn't released in North America or Japan. The FM music sounds a little better, I guess, but the game is mostly just sound effects. This would have been one of the more useless FM games. Dynamite Ducks is another one with a locked-away FM mode hidden in the code. This beat 'em up is the favorite game of Happy Console Gamer, well, one of his top 3 anyway. It wasn't released in the US, and I don't think Japan either. Oh well, who cares? Fantasy Zone 2. The music in this sequel can't touch the original. Both the PSG and the FM version sound pretty bland to my ears. Fantasy Zone The Maze. They made Fantasy Zone play like Pac-Man here because screw you. This one has the music from the first game though. It's good stuff and it sounds a lot better in the FM mode, a lot less shrill anyway. Galactic Protector. Here, you need to protect the planets and it requires the paddle controller that was only released in Japan. To me, the FM here seems like an afterthought, and the explosion sound effects are better in PSG mode. Galaxy Force from Activision. This forward-scrolling shooter wasn't released in Japan. The music is much better in FM, though the sound effects take a slight step backwards. Game Day Check Koutsu and Zen. This is a traffic safety test and not really an actual game. Not a whole lot is known about it, but it's been translated for everyone by SMS Power. I guess if I have to take traffic safety and reaction tests, I'd rather do it while listening to the FM music. Global Defense. This is a port of the arcade game called SDI. I quite like it actually, though the control does take some getting used to. If you understand how Missile Command works, you can probably do this. The FM mode here sounds much more pleasant all around. Golfomania. This one wasn't released in North America or Japan. Good, because it sucks, especially the putting. The FM mode sounds less harsh and calmer, but either way or even either way, it's pretty energetic for a golf game. Golvelius, Valley of Doom. I love this Zelda ripoff. It was developed by Compile, and I always got the best out of the Master System in PSG. The FM mode here sounds good, but the quality of some of the sound effects have been sacrificed. It sounds great both ways, but I don't think there's a clear winner here. What do you think? Great Golf. This is a more primitive but better playing game than Golfomania. The European version supposedly doesn't have the FM sound in the code. And is completely useless as this game barely makes any sound at all. Hoshiwo's Saga Shite. That's right, shite. The weebs aren't gonna like that. This is an adventure game completely in Japanese, only released in Japan surprisingly. I have no idea what's going on. The FM sounds a little better, I suppose. Satan. I really like this samurai action game. I used to be able to beat it pretty easily, not so much anymore. It's hit or miss on whether the FM music is better or worse than the PSG depending on what stage you're in. Alright, now we're up to the letter L, which means it's time for Lord of the Sword. It's tough to play this action-adventure game right after Consaden because it doesn't control anywhere near as well. The entire experience is pretty, well, let's just say vague. There's not a whole lot of music here, but it does sound decent in both formats. Maze Hunter 3D. This game has a pretty convincing 3D effect. Too bad it doesn't have very good gameplay to go with it. The FM can have some mixed results, but overall I think it's better. Megumi Rescue. This game was exclusive to Japan and it requires the paddle controller. You need to rescue people and things from the burning structures. It's actually kind of fun. The FM mode is definitely less shrill on the ears. Miracle Warriors: Seal of the Dark Lord. This RPG has always been a bit perplexing for me to play, and I've never been very far in it. But I always enjoyed the music that I heard. It sounds great in PSG and also in FM. Is it better? Maybe? Nekyu Kosein. This is a high school baseball game that stayed in Japan. You have next to no control over your outfielders. The sound is pretty bad no matter how you play it. Outrun. Supposedly, this was the first game to utilize the FM sound unit at the request of programmer Yuji Naka, who converted the music from the arcade himself. Maybe it's nostalgia speaking, but to me, the PSG in this game sounds more full and more fun to listen to. A couple of years later, we got Outrun 3D. Well, Europe and Brazil did anyway, as it was only released there. The PSG here is less good than the original, but the FM music is superior. This one has some really slow gameplay as well. Parlor games. Similar to casino games, this one lets you play 3 different games that can only be found inside of parlors. Pool is the best game here. I could take or leave the FM. Penguin Land. I'll be honest, I've never liked this game at all. The FM music doesn't make it any better. Hell yeah, it's Phantasy Star! This amazing RPG had its FM sound stripped from the international versions to make room for the translated text. Only the Japanese version offers FM sound. You can of course get patches these days to play it in FM and English. This is one game where it really took a while for the FM music to grow on me. I'm guessing probably because of nostalgia. I've never been much of a fan of the FM drums here, though I do like the added bass line. Here are a few examples. Poseidon Wars 3D. I really enjoy this one. It's based on Sega's old arcade game called Sub-Rock 3D. Surprisingly, it wasn't released in Japan. It has some great tunes and both the PSG and FM sound great. Yeah, it has those same dull drums as Phantasy Star does, but I feel that they work better here. Power Strike. This insane vertical shooter from Compile is pretty fun and it never lets up. It's actually pretty easy to beat as long as you don't die. Again, Compile is really good with PSG, especially when it comes to polyphony. As a result, the FM music here can't hold up. Also, the FM mode has far worse sound effects. It almost sounds comical when enemies die. Rambo 3. There are flashing screens in this one, so be warned. This is a pretty cool light gun game that makes use of the light phaser. It wasn't released in Japan. It's another one where they were working on an FM version of the soundtrack but never enabled it. It honestly sounds pretty good. I'm not sure if I prefer it or not. What do you think? Rampage from Activision. That's right, all of Activision's releases feature an FM soundtrack. This one wasn't released in Japan. It has original music that's exclusive to this version. It sounds much better in FM than it does in PSG, though the sound effects lose some of their luster. Still, I'd rather play this one in FM. Rastan from Taito. This hack-and-slash action game wasn't released in Japan and it has mixed results in FM. The outdoor areas sound pretty basic and weak, but the indoor areas sound pretty cool. Check out both examples. Rescue Mission. This one also has some flashing screens. This is a decently fun light phaser game where you need to protect your medic. This army really wants to kill medics specifically, what the hell? The FM sound and music is more pleasant to my ears for this one. I'm surprised that it has FM sound since there was no light phaser peripheral in Japan, thus it could never be released there. R-Type, hell yeah. This horizontal shooter really pushes the console hard. The FM music here isn't bad at all, but this one was ported by Compile and they can make that PSG sing. As a result, I think that the PSG has a bit more personality. Here's a couple of examples for you to judge for yourself. Oh, you still here? I'm honestly surprised because, let's face it, most people have probably bailed by now. But not you. I like you. So let's finish this up. Scramble Spirits. This is a decent if flickery vertical shooter and it wasn't released in Japan. The FM music helps make the game sound more like the arcade on which it's based. I definitely prefer it over the PSG for this one. Shanghai. This tile game was surprisingly not released in Japan. I don't like it. It has some really good music though, and I think I prefer the PSG version of it. Shinobi. The Master System version here is a bit different than the arcade, but still a great game. The FM music here is fantastic, and it helps it to sound more like the arcade. There's an extra channel or two of instruments added here that aren't in the PSG version. It's absolutely one of the better FM implementations, if not the best. Here's a few examples. Solomon no Kagi, or Solomon's Key from Tecmo. Not much to say, except that I think the FM sounds a little bit better in this one. Sonic the Hedgehog. This game originally didn't support FM sound, but decades later, Valley Bell created new FM music to go with the game. What's more is that the sound effects still used a PSG channel, so they maintain their quality and the music never cuts out. However, that means the Mark III with the FM sound unit attached will be missing the sound effects. There's also some musical Easter eggs in here if you can find them. What a fantastic job! Space Harrier 3D. This game has a mediocre 3D effect and extremely choppy gameplay. It does have some great music in spots though. They didn't skip on the FM version as it sounds pretty damn good, better than the game deserves. Spellcaster. This one's a cool side-scrolling action-adventure game. I've never given it an honest effort, but it seems like it could be fun. The FM soundtrack seems to be a bit better than the PSG one here. Super Racing. This is an overhead racing game that was only released in Japan, and it features a real mode and a BGM mode. The real mode doesn't have any music, while the BGM mode does. Tennis Ace. This strange sideways overhead tennis game was not released in North America or Japan. The FM sound here is a little better depending on which of the 6 musical selections that you choose. Tensai Bakabon. This adventure game is based on a licensed property and never left Japan. The FM sound is far less shrill and annoying. I'd never want to play this one using PSG audio. Thunderblade. Not exactly a perfect conversion from the arcade, is it? It's also pretty relentless. Still, I always kinda like the music in this game. It kind of sounds bad both ways. Though I do find it amusing that the FM mode features a bass drop when enemies explode. Time Soldiers. This overhead run and gun sounds pretty weak for the console. Playing it in FM, well, it's not much better. Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar. This RPG was only released in Europe. I do remember it being advertised as an upcoming title here though. This kind of reminds me of Miracle Warriors in the way that you move around. I wouldn't say that the FM is a huge improvement over the PSG, but it is a little bit more relaxing. Vigilante. This beat 'em up wasn't released in Japan. The FM music isn't bad, and I think I might prefer it. Wonder Boy in Monsterland. I played this a ton back when it first came out. I'm not sure if it's nostalgia or not, but I definitely like the PSG sound more here than the FM. I was always impressed by the sound of the door knocking in this game, but it's completely gimped in FM. Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap. This amazing sequel picks up right where the previous one left off. The FM only works on a Japanese region console, but this one was never released in Japan, so go figure. The FM mode here uses the PSG for the sound effects, or at least it sure sounds like it does. Curiously, parts of the music will still cut out when the sound effects are played. Some of the FM music can't match the PSG version, while other tunes far exceed them. Check out a bad example followed by a good example. Ys, The Vanished Omens. This was my first exposure to the franchise. The Master System version here is a little clunky and it requires a bit too much grinding even for my taste. You know me, I'm up for the challenge though. The FM version of the soundtrack is really good in most areas. Like Phantasy Star, the code for the FM sound was removed for the releases outside of Japan. However, you can get a patch that restores it so you can play it in FM and English text. Here's a few examples. Zaxxon 3D. This 3D game has an okay depth effect and also okay gameplay. The music fares a little better. The FM music sounds a little bit more flat to my ears, but at least the music doesn't cut out when the sound effects play, unlike the PSG mode. Finally, we have Zillion 2 Tri-Formation. This sequel is now just a straight-up action game. There's no Metroidvania at all. The music is still pretty good though. The FM music is a little bit more pleasant and the sound effects are less scratchy. And there you go, every game for the Master System that supports FM sound as well as a few that didn't. I think for me that it takes a while to appreciate the FM sound because I'm probably just too used to the way the PSG sounds. I mean, that's what I grew up with. And plus the FM, the percussion is just not very good and the sound effects are often pretty bad as well. Anyway, what do you generally prefer to listen to your Master System games in, PSG or FM? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack. Hey guys, I couldn't think of a very good idea for an end sketch, so instead I decided to answer your questions that you posted on Twitter, or whatever they call it now. Okay, here we go. Favorite game on the PlayStation starting with G? Ghost in the Shell. Have the feeds found Dave's body yet? Oh yeah, the wild animals are definitely feeding on him. Feds. Oh, no. Why am I peeing out of my bum? That's called diarrhea. If GameSack is so good, why isn't there a GameSack 2? What's your favorite game that Akira Toriyama was involved in? Would be a fitting tribute IMO. I'm shooting this on the day after his death was announced, so that's why. And Chrono Trigger. Hast thou learnt the art of jumping high? Yes, I have. In fact, twice in this very episode, both PSG and FM. Do raisins belong on cookies? Yeah, oatmeal cookies for sure. Was the green dog meme intentional or did it just catch fire? Well, I don't know if it caught fire, but it was not intentional. You guys picked it up and made it a thing, so I just rolled with it. Will you use this question in an upcoming sketch? No. I'm using it in this one. I sleep to GameSack every night. What do you sleep to? Hey Google, play ocean sounds. That's what I sleep to. Hey Google, stop. Why are things sent by land called shipments while things sent by ships called cargo? If the Master System was the master, why it lost? It didn't. It's just that the NES won harder. When you shower, do you wash your feet and calves with soap and a washcloth, or do you let gravity do the work? What is the shower you speak of? Why is games? Because if not, no fun be had. How many games could a game sack if a game sack could sack games? Well, it's funny you should ask, because a game sack would sack all the games it could sack if a game sack could sack games. And that's it. If you guys like this, I'll definitely do it again because it's super easy and it's fun.